In the story of colonial America, there's a chapter you've probably never heard. It's about a figure who didn't just live through history, she built a piece of it, shaping a corner of New York City and the very idea of American liberty. And it all starts with a pretty damning label given to her by the Puritan authorities.
A dangerous woman. Just let that sink in for a second. That's how Puritan leader John Endicott described her during her trial. It's not just an insult, it's a weapon, a phrase designed to completely discredit and isolate someone.
So that's the big question, right? Who was this woman, and what could she possibly have done or believed that was so threatening to the entire power structure of the 17th century?
All right, let's meet her. Her name was Lady Deborah Moody. And get this, she was a wealthy, titled English widow. In her 50s, an age when most people were, winding down, she decided to build a whole new world for herself. And we're not just talking about being a settler. Oh no, she was a founder. Okay, but before she could become a founder, she first had to become an exile. And to understand that, we have to look at this one single religious idea that got her into so much trouble. It all came down to a belief called Anabaptism. Now, the basic idea was that faith isn't something you're just born into. It's something you have to actively choose. Lady Moody believed that baptizing babies was pointless because they couldn't make a conscious decision. To us today, that sounds pretty reasonable, right? But back then, whoa. It was considered heresy, a direct attack on the authority of the church and the state. So her journey really kicks off after her husband dies in England, giving her this new, crucial independence. She sails to Massachusetts, a place literally founded for religious freedom, only to discover that its Puritan leaders were just as intolerant as the ones she'd left behind. By 1643, she's put on trial in Salem, and when they give her the choice, either take back her beliefs or get kicked out, she doesn't even blink. She chooses excommunication and leads her followers south to the much more tolerant Dutch colony of New Netherland. And let me tell you, the difference between those two colonies was like night and day. In Massachusetts, her wealth, her title, her intelligence, it all made her a threat, a dangerous woman. But for the Dutch in New Netherland, they were super pragmatic. They looked at her and saw a huge asset. They needed people, and Lady Moody had money and followers. It was a perfect match. And this is where the story really takes a turn. This is where she goes from being a religious refugee to a true founder, grabbing the opportunity the Dutch gave her to build her own community basically from the ground up. But, this land grant wasn't exactly an act of pure kindness. The Dutch director, Willem Kieft, was in the middle of a brutal, self-inflicted conflict with the local Lenape people, known as Kieft's War. So giving this land to Moody and her English followers, it was totally a strategic move. He was basically creating a human buffer zone to help defend Dutch-claimed land. So this put her right smack in the middle of this incredibly complex and often violent power struggle. You have Penhowitz, a leader of the local Lenape, whose people were being pushed off their land. And then you have Lady Moody, a refugee, who, in finding a place for her own freedom, became part of that colonial project. Her new town was built on contested ground, and it was attacked more than once by Lenape warriors who understandably saw it as an invasion. And here it is. Wow. The actual document. This is the 1645 land patent for her town, which she named Gravesend. You can see that heavy wax seal. This isn't just some old piece of paper. This is a landmark. This piece of parchment is the very first land patent ever granted to a woman in North America. I mean, you can't overstate how revolutionary this charter was. First off, it's the first to name a woman as the main person in charge. It created an English town inside a Dutch colony. It gave that town an incredible amount of power to rule itself. And the big one, it explicitly guaranteed freedom of religion. This was it. She was finally building the community she'd always dreamed of. But her vision didn't stop with politics. The woman was also a brilliant urban planner. Moody laid out Gravesend as a perfect, fortified square. She divided it into 4 neat quadrants, with common land right in the middle. It was logical, it was defensible, it was fair, and it was totally different from the chaotic, winding streets of most villages back then. And just to put her foresight into perspective for you, think about this. Her orderly, planned grid for this little town in Brooklyn came more than 150 years, a century and a half, before Manhattan adopted its own, now famous, iconic street grid. She was so far ahead of her time, it's incredible. So, as you can see, the dangerous woman who was exiled from Massachusetts didn't just scrape by. She
absolutely thrived. Her town grew, and her own reputation and influence grew right along with it. And her rise to power was amazingly fast. Just a few years after showing up, she went from being a newcomer to a seriously respected colonial leader. She was invited to the official party to welcome the new tough-as-nails governor, Peter Stuyvesant. A few years later, Stuyvesant himself asked for her help to settle a tax dispute. And eventually, he trusted her judgment so much that he gave her the power to pick her own town's leaders. I mean, it's just a stunning turnaround. The very qualities that made her an outcast in one colony, her sharp mind, her strong convictions, her leadership skills, made her a pillar of society in another. They were finally seen as a strength, not a threat.
Lady Moody died around 1659, but her influence, well, that was built to last. So let's take a look at the legacy she actually left behind.
It's believed that her final resting place is right here, in the old Gravesend Cemetery, the quiet center of the community she built. There's no headstone, no grand monument, just an unmarked grave for a woman whose life was anything but quiet.
But if you want to see her real legacy, the one that's most visible, it's literally etched into the streets of Brooklyn. If you pull up a map of Gravesend today, you can still trace the outline of her perfect four-quadrant square. Her vision is literally the foundation that the modern neighborhood is built on.
And her ideals? They echoed far beyond Gravesend. The principle of religious freedom she championed was like a seed that just kept growing. This quote here is from the Flushing Remonstrance, a famous petition from 1657 defending the rights of Quakers. It argues that the Golden Rule should be the law of the land, a principle Lady Moody had already put into practice just a few miles away. Which really leaves us with a final thought. Lady Deborah Moody was called dangerous because she thought for herself and refused to conform. It really makes you wonder, doesn't it? How many other so-called dangerous women, the thinkers, the dissenters, the builders, are out there, hidden in the pages of our history, their stories just waiting for us to find them.